Trump and Elon Musk must be held accountable for the horrific plane crash that
happens when you fire a safety committee.
Trump has American blood on his hands. All of this is Trump's fault.
Within just hours of a national tragedy, the internet is already weaponizing it and spreading insane conspiracies. We're gonna break this down and so much more on today's episode of the Brad vs. Everyone podcast, my daily show where I take on the craziest ideas from across the internet, our politics, and our media, all from an independent perspective. So this morning has been rough for me, guys. If you've been following me for a while, you know I used to live in DC. I still go there pretty regularly. I've flown in and out of DCA on these small commuter planes with like 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 people, too many times to count. And I woke up to this horrific, tragic story about the American Airlines flight that crashed with a helicopter where over 60 Americans were killed. It's really shocking and heartbreaking stuff. But as soon as I saw it unfolding and I'd processed it for just a moment, I realized it was going to turn into a political cluster. And it already has. We're going to go through the insane fake propaganda spreading across the internet as people try to blame Trump for this or blame Republicans. And we're going to take a look at the press conference Trump gave where he offered his own explanations for what went wrong. Up first, here's a compilation I put together of TikTok influencers explaining why this is all Trump's fault and how he has blood on his hands or whatever.
Trump and Elon Musk must be held accountable for the horrific plane crash that occurred last night. People are already paying in blood for the incompetence and corruption of the Trump administration.
I think it's time to give this a read. Quote, Trump guts key aviation safety committee, fires head of TSA and Coast Guard. Also, 8 days ago, Donald Trump signed another executive order to freeze all air traffic control hiring.
Trump fires heads of TSA and Coast Guard and guts key aviation safety advisory committee. He fired the head of the Coast Guard and the head of the TSA and eliminated all members of a key aviation security advisory group 8 days ago. And this is going to be the result. Maybe not a mid-air collision, but people are going to get sick, people are going to go poor, people are going to get hurt, and it's by design. And I'll never forgive you, assholes.
This is what happens when you cut federal spending to these agencies that are necessary to protect us as the American consumer. You guys would rather save dimes than save lives.
This is the kind of stuff that happens when you fire a safety committee. Mid-air accidents should not be happening at all, but especially in DC, it's almost like Trump has no idea what he's doing.
Trump has American blood on his hands. 74 of the 79 passengers and crew members died. 4 people in vehicles on the bridge where crashed also died. But Trump, being a incompetent bozo, signing executive orders that have negative impacts and consequences on American lives is not anything new. All of this is Trump's fault.
I'm going to be so for real with you guys. Basically, everything they just said is incorrect or misleading. These people have no idea what they're talking about. I don't think any of them have read the articles they're sharing, and none of them had heard of any of these people or these agencies until 5 minutes ago when they dug them up with a Google search to try to shit on Trump. We're going to walk through one by one each of these claims, and I'm going to explain to you why they make no sense and why it's not Trump's fault and none of these things caused this crash based on what we know now. But first, a quick message from today's sponsor. I don't know about you guys, but I ate way too much over the holidays and gained a few extra pounds. But I'm getting my health back on track, and that's why I'm excited to share today's sponsor, Lumen, which is a great way to increase your energy levels, feel better, and lose weight. Lumen is a device that measures your metabolism through your breath, and on the app, it lets you know if you're burning fat or carbs, and even gives you tailored guidance to improve your nutrition, workouts, sleep, and even stress management. You can also breathe breathe into it before and after workouts and meals so you know exactly what's going on with your body in real time. And Lumen will give you tips to keep you on top of your health game. Your metabolism is your body's engine. It's how your body turns the food you eat into fuel that keeps you going. Mastering your metabolism will help you get your health back on track in 2025. So if you want to take the next step in improving your health, go to lumen.me/Brad to get 20% off your Lumen. That's lumen.me/Brad for 20% off your purchase. Check it out today. You'll be glad you did. Now, all of these claims, these alarmist claims blaming the Trump administration's various actions about different agencies or hiring, do not actually check out when you go through them, which we're going to do. But first, I was curious, where did this come from? And my suspicion is that a lot of these TikTok talking heads, by the way, guys, these are huge influencers with millions of combined followers. These videos are popping off and spreading like wildfire. These are not just a couple tiny accounts. Anyway, I think I traced this back to the origin of this rumor, which is the far-left activist who calls himself a journalist, Aaron Rupar, who tweeted as this was all unfolding late last night, headlines from a week ago as an incident near DCA appears to be the deadliest aviation disaster in the US since 9/11. And the headline is a Huffington Post article titled "Trump Guts Key Aviation Safety Committee Fires Head of TSA Coast Guard." This is just straight up factually inaccurate. While what happened last night was terrible and there was an enormous human toll, it wasn't the worst aviation disaster since 9/11. There have been worse ones, like an incident in Queens where more than 200 people died. That's, I guess, somewhat pedantic, but it's just like, if you're a journalist, check your facts before you say things, especially in the aftermaths of tragedies. More importantly, the heads of the TSA, the Transportation Security Administration, right, the people that make you take your shoes off, and the Coast Guard, the person in charge of the Coast Guard, those are political appointees. So it is normal and extremely common that a president fires those people and puts in his own people when he takes office from an administration from a different party. They do that across all sorts of agencies, whether it's a Democratic president or a Republican president. And to be clear, while they're doing that, when they fire them and they're waiting to confirm a new person, somebody steps up from the civil service and serves as the acting director. So somebody's still doing the job. Usually somebody who's been there a long time, has been a part of the agency and knows what they're doing. So it's not like there's no one doing these jobs. He just removed Biden's appointee because that's what presidents typically do, is remove the person that the president from the other party had put in and put somebody with their beliefs in. That's just normal. It's not scandalous. And it had absolutely nothing to do with this crash. TSA screens security as people get on planes, right? So it's to stop, threats of attacks or extremist groups or things like 9/11 that happened. They don't do anything. They have literally nothing to do with air traffic control, with avoiding accidents and collisions. Irrelevant. Same with the Coast Guard. No real involvement here. And they keep talking about this Aviation Safety Committee. To be clear, none of these people have ever heard of this committee. They have no idea what it is or what it does. They're just weaponizing this because they found it with a quick Google search. I took 5 minutes to actually read about this committee. And to be clear, it has no hands-on or day-to-day involvement in air traffic control or accident prevention or anything like that. It is an advisory committee that makes recommendations to the TSA about airport security, right? The kinds of things they do to screen out threats through TSA and stop crimes from happening. Again, not about airplane safety in terms of preventing crashes. It took me, guys, like 30 minutes of basic research looking at the TSA website to find this stuff out, to separate fact from fiction, to realize how demagogic and dishonest this propaganda is. None of these actions by the Trump administration, well, maybe you object to them for other reasons and we could have that conversation. None of them contributed to this accident, which we still don't know very much about. We don't know exactly what went wrong or what happened, and responsible people wait until we learn more to start throwing blame and casting aspersions, and don't start using them to attack their political opponents while the bodies are still warm. Now, what about this hiring freeze that they talked about? Could this have contributed to the crash in some way? That's what journalists like Mehdi Hasan, formerly of MSNBC, said on Twitter. Even a Democratic member of Congress shared that she was praying for the families and demanding answers, sharing a press release from her committee about Trump's dangerous freeze of air traffic control hiring. This also has no evident connection to what happened at DCA. First, we don't even know yet if air traffic control did anything wrong, or if maybe the helicopter pilot messed up. All of this will have to come out in the wash. And then, even if you assume that the air traffic controller did something wrong, how a hiring freeze put in place, simply meaning they weren't going to hire new employees because they're trying to get the federal budget under control, God forbid, how that would have contributed to this is completely unclear. No one's bothering to explain it at all, what the connection is there. And for me, the math is simply not mathing. He instituted this freeze 8 days ago. Yes, there's a shortage of air traffic controllers, and we'll talk more about why that is later. But the idea that anybody would have been hired and made it through training and been there to relieve overworked stress, or people who had been pulling extra time or anything like that, which we don't even know if that was happening, is totally unrealistic. A person wouldn't even be hired yet, let alone through all their training. It wouldn't have had any impact on this. You're just bringing up something irrelevant to try to tar a freak accident and tragedy and throw that at the people you hate politically. That's disgusting from a sitting congresswoman. And it's disgusting from these TikTok influencers who are accusing Trump and Elon Musk of having blood on their hands, and as if they are responsible for this, and not even doing basic research or logically establishing any remote connection between their actions and this incident. They're just kind of assuming Trump bad, and therefore he must have blood on his hands for this because Trump is evil and everything's his fault. You sound deranged. And this is so gross and so disrespectful to the victims of this tragedy and their families that people are already leaping to politicize this. And I know, to be clear, that Republicans do this too sometimes. We saw this when Biden was president. There were freak accidents or tragedies that people blamed on him. And it is a part of our human instinct and nature, unfortunately. But it is a really toxic one, this sense of tribalism that leads us to constantly blame others and attack others. And I think we should all be trying to overcome that instinct, not succumbing to it and joining in on a frenzy to destroy our partisan opponents while people are grieving for their husbands and wives and brothers and sisters and children and parents. It's like, gosh, it's just terrible. You guys let me know what you think of this toxic online response. Are you even surprised at this point? I wish I could say that I am, but I'm not. So let me know what you think in the comments. I do read the comments, and I'm always interested in hearing what you guys have to say. Do hit that like button and make sure you're subscribed if you aren't yet. Now, Trump has also given today a press conference about the crash at DCA, and some of his comments are sparking controversy. So we're going to walk through them. Towards the very beginning of his remarks, Trump went after Biden and Obama. Take a listen.
I put safety first. Obama, Biden, and the Democrats put policy first. And they put politics at a level that nobody's ever seen, because this was the lowest level. Their policy was horrible, and their politics was even worse. So as you know, last week, long before the crash, I signed an executive order restoring our highest standards for air traffic controllers and other important jobs throughout the country.
So I want to be clear. There is some truth to this. The Obama-Biden administration infamously, and I'll link to sources, I've talked about this recently, instituted diversity initiatives at the FAA to promote diversity among their ranks and make their air traffic controllers more diverse, that excluded a ton of qualified candidates unfairly and arbitrarily, while they funneled the answers to this weird personality test to minority-associated groups so they could get more diverse people in these jobs. It's something they're being sued over currently. It's a massive scandal and something I think is disgraceful beyond belief. But there's no clear connection to the DCA tragedy, at least certainly not yet. We have no idea yet if the air traffic controller even did anything wrong, and if they did, whether they were a DEI hire or not, we don't know. So I don't really like that he's immediately bringing that up, and he's immediately coming out there and trashing his political opponents in his opening salvo on this after this tragedy had just unfolded. I agreed with something somebody wrote online. He may well be 100% correct, but he could have waited and worked that into a conversation later. Now is the time for compassion, not politics. I agree with that. Trump is not one to take the high road, and he never has been, so I can't say I'm surprised, but I just didn't like the way he came out and instantly made this just as political as his critics are making it. You'd hope he could take the high road as president, but that's not Trump. That's not who he is, and I guess it would be foolish to expect him to change at this point. Like, he went after Mayor Pete Buttigieg, who was Biden's transportation secretary, pretty hard in this press conference. Take a listen.
The FAA, which is overseen by Secretary Pete Buttigieg, a real winner. That guy's a real winner. Do you know how badly everything's run since he's run the Department of Transportation? He's a disaster. He was a disaster as a mayor. He ran his city into the ground, and he's a disaster now. He's just got a good line of bullshit.
Really? I mean, maybe Mayor Pete did a bad job as transportation secretary. Certainly there were controversies under his watch, but you're rolling out to the press conference after more than 60 Americans were killed in a horrifying accident, and you've got to immediately take the gloves off and just pound one of your political opponents into oblivion. I don't think that's appropriate or classy. And Trump really did push this idea that this is potentially happening because of DEI, but he doesn't have hard facts to back that up yet. Take a listen.
Are you saying this crash was somehow caused and the result of diversity hiring? And what evidence have you seen to support these claims?
It just could have been. We have a high standard. We've had a much higher standard than anybody else. And there are things where you have to go by brain power, you have to go by psychological quality. So we don't know, but we do know that you had two planes at the same level. You had a helicopter and a plane. That shouldn't have happened. And we'll see. We're going to look into that, and we're going to see. But certainly for an air traffic controller, we want the brightest, the smartest, the sharpest. We want somebody that's psychologically superior. And that's what we're going to have.
We don't even yet know the names of the 67 people who were killed. And you are blaming Democrats and DEI policies and air traffic control and seemingly the member of the U.S. military who was flying that Black Hawk helicopter. Don't you think you're getting ahead of the investigation right now?
No, I don't think so at all. I don't think were the names of the people. You mean the names of the people that are on the plane? You think that's going to make a difference?
Does it comfort their families?
They are a group of people that have lost their lives. If you want a list of the names, we can give you that. We'll be giving that very soon. We're in coordination with American Airlines. We're in coordination very strongly, obviously, with the military. But I think that's not a very smart question. I'm surprised coming from you.
So again, it's true. The FAA has enacted various DEI initiatives that have excluded qualified candidates over the years and pushed diversity goals, and I think that's horrific and insane. But we have no idea whether that's what happened here. And the story that Trump reads off is actually kind of misleading.
Article, the Federal Aviation Administration, this was before I got to office, recently, second term. The FAA is actively recruiting workers who suffer severe intellectual disabilities, psychiatric problems, and other mental and physical conditions under a diversity and inclusion hiring initiative spelled out on the agency's website. Can you imagine?
He's reading a real story about a headline from Fox News from when Biden was president that wrote, "The FAA's diversity push includes a focus on hiring people with severe intellectual and psychiatric disabilities." But to be clear, this was actually a policy put in place in 2013 that remained in place throughout Trump's first term as president. And it wasn't about air traffic controllers. You can't even get that job if you have minor health issues, mental health issues, let alone severe disabilities. The FAA employs tons of people in tons of administrative and regular roles. It's not just air traffic controllers. So it's kind of misleading for Trump to be reading off this headline and suggesting that the FAA was putting people with severe disabilities in charge of air traffic, which is what they're talking about, when that wasn't the case. And again, there's no reason to believe that happened in this incident. Even a fully competent person who was in the air traffic control room could have just made a mistake. And we, again, don't even know that. It's also possible the helicopter pilot was accurately informed by air traffic control and just made a mistake anyway. It's just like To be throwing these aspersions is just very premature and not responsible when we don't have the full facts and when some of the stuff he's saying is misleading. A reporter asked him if he had any evidence as to how DEI or diversity initiative played a role in this crash, and he just said it was common sense. Take a listen.
That's why I'm trying to figure out how you can come to the conclusion right now that diversity had something to do with this crash.
Because I have common sense, okay? And unfortunately, a lot of people don't.
Sorry, Mr. President, but I actually think common sense would be waiting till the facts come in to jump to conclusions and not jumping to attack your political opponents or push culture war discussions into the immediate aftermath of a tragedy. I hate it when the left does it, which they do all the time, but I'm also really not a fan of it when any politician does it, including Republicans and including Trump. So I thought this press conference was a bit of a shit show personally, but if you disagree, you can let me know what you think in the comments below. Do hit that like button and make sure you're subscribed if you aren't yet. I want to leave you guys with one important point, which is that, look, I get really anxious flying on planes and I hate it. And half the time I'm having a mini panic attack in my head about if we're going to crash. And even though I know turbulence doesn't cause plane crashes, usually I get freaked out by a little turbulence. But that is emotional. It's not logical. And even with this crash, air travel is still incredibly safe. Here are some statistics from National Review. Prior to the DCA incident, of course, there hasn't been a fatal commercial aviation accident in the United States in nearly 16 years. This is despite around 800 million passengers flying every year on more than 16 million flights that spend about 25 million hours in the air. The numbers fluctuate, so you can't extrapolate perfectly, but at a conservative estimate, since the last crash in 2009, more than 10 billion passengers have flown in the US on more than 150 million flights that spent more than 225 million hours in the air. What happened yesterday was a terrible tragedy, but it was an aberration. The death toll as a result of commercial aviation in the United States since 2009 is 67. The death toll from WASPs over that same period is more than 1,000. Commercial aviation is a miracle, and it's because it's a miracle that we are so shocked when things go wrong. I think those are important facts to keep in mind as we process this horrific story, and honestly, my heart goes out to the victims and their families. And I just implore you all, whether you're left, right, or somewhere in the middle, to not weaponize and politicize tragedies in their immediate aftermath. Even if the other side does it to you, take the high road, guys. That'll be it for this episode of the Brad vs. Everyone podcast. I had some other things planned to discuss, but I think I'll bump those to tomorrow or next week because honestly, this is just a somber day and this is sucking up all the oxygen in the room, and I want to treat it with the seriousness that it deserves. Do hit that like button before you go, make sure you're subscribed, and we'll talk again tomorrow.